June 17th, 1934. Stick that in your head for a minute. Jeff Flake yesterday gave a speech on the floor of the Senate in which he, shall we say, took on Donald Trump. And, you know, in some ways it was a consequential moment. I was going to say noble, and then I thought, you know, it seems like a noble moment. But last night, after he trashes Trump yesterday for basically lying to the American people, then last night he votes to allow banks to prevent us from exercising our Seventh Amendment rights to a trial by jury, and giving, facilitating forced arbitration. Last night Mike Pence had to go down to the floor of the Senate to break the tie, and to say banks can continue to screw us. This is what the Republicans are up to. And, if Jeff Flake actually had any moral courage, he would have voted no on that. For that matter, if he had any moral courage, he would have left his party. It's extraordinary. Now, that said, he did have a few interesting things to say, and we've got a few clips of it. Here is one. This is Senator Jeff Flake.
I rise today with no small measure of regret.
I think.
Regret for the compromise of our moral authority.
We need to grab the audio.
And by our, I mean all of our complicity in this alarming and dangerous state of affairs. It is time for our complicity and our accommodation of the unacceptable to end. Rise today.
Yeah. And here's another clip.
We must never allow ourselves to lapse into thinking that that is just the way things are now. If we simply become inured to this condition, thinking that it is just politics as usual, then heaven help us.
Yeah, then heaven help.
Reckless, outrageous, and undignified behavior has become excused and countenanced as telling it like it is, when it is actually just reckless, outrageous, and undignified.
Yeah. So, 17th of June, 1934, von Papen, the German Vice Chancellor, Franz von Papen, spoke at the University of Marburg. This was the last speech that was given against Adolf Hitler. And, it's particularly interesting to check this out. He said, and I quote, this is from von Papen's speech. And von Papen, by the way, 3 weeks later was the night of the Long Knives. The Nazis reached out, and this is where you can see, we're not really, the United States is not Nazi Germany, and we're not replaying the rise of Hitler and Donald Trump, at least so far. 3 weeks after von Papen gave this speech, he was put in prison, and a number of his colleagues and friends were murdered during the night of the Long Knives. But anyhow, here's what he said in his speech. He said, the function of the press should be to inform the government where deficiencies have crept in. See, he was complaining about the Nazis basically trying to shut down newspapers, which they were doing. The function of the press should be to inform the government where deficiencies have crept in, where corruption is settled, where serious mistakes are being made, where unsuitable men are in the wrong positions, starting to sound like Jeff Flake, and where transgressions are committed against the spirit of the German Revolution. An anonymous news service, think of what's going on with Facebook and Twitter right now. An anonymous news service, no matter how well organized, can never be a substitute for this responsibility of the press. Deficient or primitive intellects are not in themselves justification for war against intellectualism. And if today we sometimes complain about, he calls them 150% National Socialists, in other words, super fanatic Nazis, then we mean those intellectuals without substance, people who would like to deny the right of existence to scientists of world fame just because they're not party members. The sentence, men make history, has frequently been misunderstood as well. Great men are not made by propaganda, but rather grow through their deeds and are recognized by history. Whoever speaks of Prussian tradition, German tradition, therefore must first of all think of silent and impersonal service, and last or not at all of reward and recognition. Whoever toys with such ideas should not conceal the fact that the one who threatens with the guillotine is the one who is most likely to come under the executioner's axe. No nation can afford a constant revolt from below if it wants to pass the test of history. And this is what Steve Bannon is stirring up, is this constant revolt from the bottom. Well, not just Steve Bannon, the whole you know, the whole right-wing petro-billionaire machine. At some time, a stable social structure must emerge, maintained by an impartial judiciary and by an undisputed state authority. Germany must not go adrift in uncharted seas toward unknown shores with no one knowing when it will stop. The state is the sole power and the last guarantor of something to which every citizen can lay claim: ironclad justice. The government is well informed on all the self-interest, lack of character, want of truth, unchivalrous conduct, and arrogance trying to rear its head under the cover of the German Revolution. So he calls, you know, just like Jeff Flake says, you know, Trump is not suited for the job. He's saying that Hitler is not telling the truth, and he's unchivalrous and he's arrogant. The German people know that their situation is serious. They feel the economic distress. They smile at clumsy attempts to deceive them with false optimism. No organization and no propaganda, no matter how good, will in the long run be able to retain trust. Confidence and readiness to cooperate cannot be won by incitement, especially of youth, nor by threats against helpless segments of the people, but only by discussion with the people with trust on both sides. So this was the last, I mean, quite literally the last appeal that was made in Germany before Hitler just like closed all the doors. At the end of June, June 30th, 1934, the New York Times, this is a week and a half after this speech, or a couple weeks after this speech, the New York Times wrote a piece. It was pointed out long ago that Hitler had laid up future troubles for himself by the manner in which he organized his campaign for leadership in Germany. On the one hand, he mobilized the radicals, the fighting forces of the streets, promising them better conditions when he could take power. On the other, he mobilized certain sections of the strong industrialist class who furnished funds for his campaign, and to them he gave pledges of liquidation of labor elements and of socialistic and labor elements which had blocked their plans. And you get this? The New York Times is pointing out that, you know, Hitler rose to power through this two-pronged effort. Number one, activate the bigots in the streets and get them out in the streets and have that be your electoral base. And number two, reach out to what he refers to as the strong industrial class and have them fund your campaign and promise to them that you're going to destroy socialism, right, the social safety net, and you're going to break up the labor unions. And in fact, that's what happened. Continuing with this article in the New York Times, this is absolutely fascinating, by the way, the time machine there. Both of these elements Hitler has striven to satisfy. The industrialists have been freed of labor unions, of wage scales they considered too high, and of levies for social services they called oppressive. Work in industry has been extended to take care of as many party followers as possible, and many more places have been made through the dismissal of Marxists, liberals, and Jews. But the steady decline of industry has tended to handicap the effort, and both sides have been dissatisfied with the results. Moreover, the effort to consolidate a supreme and unified party has tended to defeat the purpose. And, you know, on the one hand, the Tea Partiers, excuse me, the stormtroopers, have taken in many radicals who profess themselves to be converted, but who have helped to turn the Nazi army decidedly to the left, and even given strength to Rome and Goebbels. And, you know, it goes on there.
This is